Hello and welcome to the Contrary. I'm host Bonnie Urbay, and this week we have the pleasure of doing a half-hour interview with Representative Val Demings, who is an up-and-coming Democratic member of the U.S. House, very vocal, a great standard bearer for the party, and former police chief in Orlando and the first woman to hold that position, first woman of any color to hold that position. So welcome, Congresswoman Demings. How are you?
I'm delighted to be with you. I'm doing well, all things considered.
Okay, let's go to COVID and Congress and what is going on there. What do you think about how Republicans are trying to handle the COVID crisis and the huge divide between what Democrats want to do and what the Republicans want to do?
Let me start here. And you've already mentioned that I served a lot of years as a law enforcement officer, had the honor of serving as police chief. I did not know the parties of the people I worked with, nor the people who needed our help. We just had a job to do. I took it very seriously, and we did everything we could to get that job done. I love serving in Congress. I've been in public service a long time, but I have to say one of the things that has truly been disappointing to me is the partisan divide. Look, we can still be Democrats, I believe. We can still be Democrats. We can be Republicans. We can still celebrate our values and our beliefs about the world. But in tough times, in times of crises, we ought to be. I think the people who elected us, the overwhelming majority, expect us to come together and get the job done. If there was any time that we need to come together and lay our politics aside, it's during this COVID-19 crisis. Look, nobody planned it. We didn't expect it. But here it is. And so it's time for us to come together and take care of the people that represented us to do just that. We know that, we started off with the CARES package, the first one, and our first goal was to take care of people, our families that were suffering, our small businesses. We say that small businesses are the backbone of our community. I believe that to be true. And so
they're the job engines of the economy. Most people don't work for major corporations. They work for small businesses.
And that's why they are the backbone of any community, because of the overwhelming number of people, I believe it's 70% or more, that small businesses employ. And so our first goal was what can we do to stop the bleeding for businesses and families that are hurting? So we passed CARES 1, $2.2 trillion, the largest relief package in the history of our country, but we quickly found out it was not enough. And so we scrambled to get back to D.C. recently to pass an interim relief package because the Paycheck Protection Program ran out of money. And so with the whole purpose being to keep people on the payroll, we had to go back, pass this emergency package. And now we're in the process of working on the next CARES package. We still need to take care of people. We still need to take care of individuals. We still need to fix some loopholes like thinking about credit unions and community banks and other smaller banks being able to be engaged and involved in this process. Testing is so very important. If we're going to get this beast, I call it, under control, the more people that are tested, the more we get more data and information about what's going on in each community, the better we're able to bring this thing to an end. And then making sure that our hospitals have capacity. That probably was one of my number one concerns about hospital capacity. They're dealing with something in addition to all of the other critical needs, shootings, stab victims, people who have heart attacks or other issues needing immediate medical attention. Now they're dealing with COVID-19. So we want to make sure that we take care of those hospitals so they will have capacity as well. And I'll end with this question with when we talk about the need to take care of local and state governments, what we're really talking about here are our police, our firefighters, our emergency service workers, our doctors, our nurses, and other supporting workers. It is critical that we take care of those who really provide the necessary infrastructure to keeping our community whole and healthy and safe. So we still have a lot of work to do, and I just hope and pray that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will join us. Look, let's sit down at the table. Let's fight it out if we have to, but let's walk away with what is in the best interest of the people that we serve.
Well, you come from a state with a Republican governor, Governor DeSantis, and a lot of Republican governors are talking already about lifting restrictions. There seems to be, if you don't mind my characterizing it this way, but there seems to be a war that's broken out between Republicans who want to start businesses again and Democrats like Governor Cuomo of New York who want to prevent people from dying. Tell me about this dividing line. How did it work out in the first and second CARES packages?
You know, when I was first elected to Congress in 2016, one of the things that I did was to try to build relationships with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And in order to do that, I had to really understand them and what they see, what they value, what they see as important. And when we would sit down in each other's offices and we would talk about how we care about our communities, how we want to keep our communities safe and healthy and solvent. We want to support our small businesses. And we had this long list of things that we want to do that were similar. And what I do know is that there are Republican governors and Democratic governors, Republican members of Congress and Democratic members of Congress, and local mayors who want nothing more than to get back to business as usual, to get back to some sense of normalcy, to get those businesses going again, those restaurants full again. But we have to do it in a safe manner. Our number one priority, my number one priority as a police chief, my number one priority as a member of Congress is the safety and security of the people I serve. Because if they're not safe, if they're not healthy, all of the other things that we are fighting for seem to take a back seat. And so keeping people safe, we're just not ready. And, you know, some communities, maybe I'm not going to tell someone in the Midwest what is best for them. But what I will tell them, the advice that I will give people all over this nation, and certainly my governor and other leaders here in Florida, this is a public health crisis. I think it would be wise to listen to advice and take the advice from public health experts, from public health officials, from our local health departments, from the Center of Disease Control, from the Surgeon Generals, your state Surgeon General and our United States Surgeon General. It's a public health crisis. Let's listen to them. We've seen the results of social distancing. We've seen the positive results. And those places that have been serious about social distancing, they've seen their numbers, they've seen that curve flatten and seen their numbers not continue to increase, but to decrease. If we're going to get where we need to be in Florida, we've got to see those numbers decrease. We recently had the most deadly day of deaths as a result of COVID-19. Now, I got to tell you, it doesn't seem like that's an indication that we need to be getting back to business as usual. So, you know, it's painful, but let's all take a deep breath. Let's remember the safety of our community, our constituents, our job one. Let's work together to come up with a timeline that protects our businesses and their bottom lines, but more importantly, protects the lives of Floridians and those across this country.
Talk to me a little bit about what's going on with the small business, the payroll protection program that's so vital to small businesses. And yet we all read that a lot of that money that was supposed to go to small businesses, which was defined by the SBA as businesses with fewer than 500 employees. But we all know if you've got 500 employees, you're not a small business. You're not a 4-person business, a 10-person, a 50-person small business.
Yeah.
And a lot of these companies that got the money turned it back, right? So what's going on? Because they were major corporations, they were household names, and they squeezed all the smaller businesses out.
And you know what? One of the things that we really tried to be as careful as we could was to protect those mom and pop businesses, for example. It was to include gig workers or freelancers or, those who are self-employed, where the only employees might be one person or a husband and wife team. We did not intend for businesses to find loopholes where they viewed the legislation as meaning, oh, well, I only have 500 employees in one place, and not to mention the number of chains across this country. It's so disappointing that that happened, because it meant that those who needed help the most were either denied or the money had run out before their applications were even processed. And so, I am thankful, though, for those companies who, and you know what, I want to be really careful in saying that they took advantage of the system, if you will, because they did what I believe they did, unfortunately, what the legislation allowed them to do, although it was not intended for them. There was nothing to prevent them from taking advantage of the system. And so that just means we as legislators have to always, and we were thinking about, the relief package that was done or the stimulus package that was done in 2008 and 2009, and what some of the unintended consequences of that was. But what we realize is that we have to be ever vigilant to make sure that we have processes in place, oversight in place, that does not allow bigger corporations to access resources and funding that is intended for the most vulnerable businesses in our community. So believe me, as we work on CARES 2, we are being very careful and very cautious to make sure that we have the safeguards and the guardrails in place, if you will, to prevent what happened with CARES 1 from happening again. Many people are depending on the payroll protection program. It was designed to keep 90% of hardworking people, and I define them as people who have to go to work every day, on the payroll. And it's just unfortunate that the program ran out of money.
But it did run out of money, and it was bigger than CARES 2. There was more money in the first plan. Tell me if there's a congressional role in oversight in seeing that the money that went to the major corporations is pulled back by the SBA or given back by the companies and then redistributed to smaller businesses. Is that going on at all?
Well, it is, and I'm sure you've heard about some of the companies that have voluntarily, if you will, returned the money. Look, it was the right thing to do. And so as and there's also been some guidelines or direction coming from the U.S. Treasury Department that will help to further that kind of action. But yes, I mean, I take, as a member of Congress, I take responsibility along with my other colleagues that it should not have happened. It did. And we've got to make sure that it doesn't happen again. As you know, with the original CARES 1 package, we really tried to put an oversight commission, if you will, in place, along with someone to lead that effort. The president wasn't too keen on that. I know Mitch McConnell wasn't as well, but this is a prime example of why oversight is so necessary. If we want to help the most vulnerable, if we want to help the least of these in our community, then we have to make sure that those guardrails are in place. So yes, to answer your question, we are taking due care to make sure that the guardrails are put in place to prevent what we've seen in the past.
Okay, and then with CARES 2, it seems like some more money was put given to hospitals and healthcare providers for more ventilators, more masks, more gloves, all that protective gear that's in such short supply. But also a little less went to small businesses. Tell me how, and that is currently being given out right now, recently, very recently. Tell me, please, about what there might be in the third package. Is there going to be a third package? Maybe a fourth package? How long can this go on?
I got a feeling, though, great question. I have a feeling that it will go on, though, as long as it needs to. And let me go back to something I said earlier. And this is for my Republican colleagues and friends and Democratic as well. No one planned this, but we have to deal with it. And this is a time for true leadership to rise to the occasion. This is a tough one. It's like nothing we've ever seen before, which means we're going to have to do some things we have never done before. We passed the interim package, $484 billion. Remember, first was $2.2 trillion, $484 billion. That's a lot of money. We know it's not enough. We anticipate, we expect, and we're trying to prepare for that money to run out. We aren't quite sure. We're looking at the data. We're trying to get a hold on the number of small businesses that are actually in the queue. What this COVID-19 has helped us to realize is really point to some of our vulnerabilities. There's no one way to determine right now, although we're working on it as we're having this discussion, to determine how many businesses are in the queue. And so so without that information, we can't anticipate when the dollars or how far we can stretch those dollars. Mm-hmm. I think the smart approach is to just assume it's not going to be enough. And we need to start anticipating the next package. So we find ourselves, we've got to juggle a lot of things at once. That's what crisis managers do. That's what leaders do. And so while we try to help businesses survive, we can never, I don't believe we have the ability to make them whole, as we've been through this since mid-March and in some instances long before that. I don't think we'll have the ability to make them whole, but we are trying to help them survive. We're trying to be bridge builders to get them over this period so they can survive. But while we do that too, we've got to make sure that we take care of our hospitals. When people are sick, we want to increase testing. We've said that's a vital part of this process. Well, if we increase testing, we can anticipate that more people will test positive. We've got to make sure they can get the medical support that they need, which means we have to look at hospital capacity and look at how to increase it. And I think overall, I've seen some pretty creative ways all over the country that people are doing that right here in Orange County, Florida. But we have to anticipate the next wave. There's been some discussion. We don't know exactly, but there may be another resurgence in the fall. We don't want to be blindsided. We want to be ready. And so we can anticipate that if we got to improve testing, then we need more resources, more funding. If we got to make sure that people have the proper personal protection equipment, then we've got to increase funding, and we've got to come up with a national disbursement system to make sure that those resources and equipment are going to the communities that need them the most, which means we need to have a unified command, like I've seen many times as a police chief on the street and in communities. We need to have a unified command.
Let me jump in for a second, if I may, on that question. Please give the president and the federal government, the president first, the White House, the executive branch, a grade on how it's handled COVID.
If I had to give them a grade, I would say a D-. And I say that because I just feel, look, the president of the United States, I see as the most powerful position in the world. And the person should exercise the ability to bring to assemble not only the best of the best medical professionals and scientists in the nation, but across the world. The world, our friends and adversaries, look to the United States of America to provide leadership during times of crisis. And we haven't done that. And look, but as I say that, I also know that this is a tough moment. This is big. It's complicated, and it's not easy. With the right leadership, though, we can begin to bring this nation back to where it needs to be. I think the president has some great people around him. I just hope that the president would utilize the talent around him, and in this public health crisis, send a message that's clear that we should be listening to our medical experts and our scientists in this situation. I also wish that the president would use the full authority of his office. We know he can do that. I served as an impeachment manager. I know that he certainly knows how to use his power to fully implement the Defense Production Act. As we talk about much needed life-saving equipment, whether that's for healthcare workers or ventilators, I wish the president would fully implement that act so we can make sure that businesses, the private sector, is working hand in hand with the public sector to make sure that we are manufacturing and producing the numbers of equipment that we need all over the nation to keep people safe.
All right,
and so I say a D minus.
Okay, thank you for that judgment. I want to spend the last few minutes that we have on you as a rising star within the Democratic Party. And you talked about the executive response not being what it should be. And I think there's pretty, not in the United States, but in the world, there is pretty uniform thinking that it hasn't been, that other countries have handled the COVID response much more quickly, much more unified, and they, as a result, have much lower death rates and infection rates. You were talked about as a possible vice presidential candidate with Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. Have you talked to him about joining the ticket?
I have not had a direct discussion with him. We've had several discussions with members of his team. And let me say this, and you probably already know this, but I want to say it too, so people really fully understand who I am. I grew up the youngest of 7 children, the daughter of a maid and a janitor. I watched my dad go to work 7 days a week to keep food on our table and a roof over our heads. I watched my mother get on her knees and scrub other people's floors to make a living. But they taught me, the world doesn't owe you anything. You get out there and you work hard, you pay your dues, and you earn your way. And I've taken every day that I've had to do just that. I consider it a blessing to have been able to work as a social worker, working with broken families and broken children. I considered it a blessing to be able to serve, starting out as an officer at the Orland Police Department and working my way up through the ranks to become the chief of police. It was a tough job, but I chose tough jobs because I want to be able to give back and create opportunities for others like I've had. In Congress, I probably made it a lot tougher than it needs to be because I'm really committed to doing the right thing and doing whatever I need to do to serve the constituents of Congressional District 10 and serve this nation. The fact that my name is being called as a serious potential vice presidential candidate is such an honor to me. But I think it further demonstrates exactly what we should all be working hard for, and that's to create opportunities for men, women, boys, girls, rich and poor. Opportunities that are a result of your hard work and dedication and commitment. And so, I'll just say this. I'm honored that my name is being called. I am trying to focus, though, on the work that is right before me, and that's to help to slay this dragon called COVID-19, get back to some degree of normalcy, reopening our businesses, especially those small businesses that are suffering. And we'll see what the future brings. But understand, I'm honored that my name is being called.
Well, you certainly are getting a lot more exposure as a rising star in the party than you were a year or so ago. So best of luck to you in whatever direction you want to go in. And please, when you are the VP candidate, please remember us and do an interview with us about that. So thank you so
I
much.
will do that. That sounds like a date. Let's keep it.
Thank you, Representative Demings. I'm Bonnie Urbay. That's it for this edition of To the Contrary. Please visit our website at pbs.org/To the Contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, please join us next week.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Colcom Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation. For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary.
Be more. PBS.